Today's video for you is how to work with half pans like these here, or in other words, all this lot here. What are they, how do they work, and how much water do you use with them? So that's our beginner's tutorial for you today. Let's get the brushes wet, shall we? And let's get started. Half pans are really useful, especially for detail work. And that's what I tend to use for all of my paintings that you see on the screen here. And there's a variety of different manufactured half pans out there as well, from Winsor & Newton, Sennelier, Daniel Smith, and many other really good companies out there. You can also buy some very inexpensive ones as well. I've got videos on that to the right hand side of the screen here, and also in the link down below. Now I do say half pans, but you can also buy full-size pans as well, stay on there, where you can have basically two together, side by side like that, so you can have quite a large block of paint. But most people tend to use half pans, as you can see here, very often in a tin, or like this plastic one I've got here, which I've had for many years. But the other good thing about half pans is that you can buy individual ones. You have to buy a whole set. You can buy whatever colours you want to buy. And if you're a beginner, which I'm assuming you are if you're watching this video, then what I suggest you do is just buy a basic set to begin with. Something like, for example, Cotsman, which is a Winsor & Newton, is a good set, or Daniel Smith's is a good set, or any set which isn't too expensive to start off with. But if you get into watercolours like I do, you can buy the more expensive ones as well, the better quality paints. And these have got a high pigmentation value in them. And these hold more pigments inside them as well. So therefore they do tend to last a bit longer, and I find the colours are much more vibrant. I always say, always buy the best you can afford, so it's well worth doing that. Okay, so we've got half pans, but what about tube paints? Why don't you just buy some tube paints and use them instead? Well, I find with tube paints, if you're working on a small scale like I do, tube paints are really useful for larger washes, that sort of thing, to save sort of mixing up the colours within the half pans. But they can also be quite wasteful to a certain degree as well. Again, it depends on the type of painting you're trying to do. So sometimes what I might try and do, when the half pans, these little blocks of paint here, are empty, I'll fill them up with some tube paint instead. And I've done that within my selection here. But occasionally, like this one here, like the Opera Rose, I've replaced the whole thing with a brand new half pan of paint. The only thing with a tube version, when you put it into a spare half pan well like that, you can buy these online by the way if you ever want to. So it's worth having a look on those big online shops. So when you use a tube paint like this one here into the half pan, it doesn't last quite as long as one which is a designated half pan paint. That's because that paint is highly concentrated. So therefore it lasts much longer than the same colour from a tube in a spare half pan. So well worth knowing. That's really the basic difference between the two. The pigments will be the same and so on inside. We're not going to go into pigment codes or anything like that. I don't do that sort of thing anyway. So as I said earlier on, always buy the best you can afford. But there you go, there's two different versions of some of the cheaper brands you can buy. I think the whole set on this one on my left is probably about £25. So that's really cheap for watercolours. But the real difference between these, compared to my own version over there, the very tatty looking one, is simply the quality of the paints. I mean, don't get me wrong, these two work really well. However, there will be differences such as, for one, light fastness. So if you have your painting hung up on a wall, behind glass, in direct sunlight in your living room, will those colours fade over time? But these are really good starter kits for half pans. So if you want to get started with watercolours, don't know where to go, don't know what to buy, go for something like this first of all, just to test it out and see how you get on with it. And see if it's definitely something that you want to be doing. If you do, and you get the hang of it, then you can start to upgrade to more expensive watercolours, which will last you longer, and also you'll be able to tell the difference within the paints when you're using them as well. But not so much initially if you're a beginner, okay? So worth bearing this in mind. So how do they work? Well, first of all, half pans are solid to begin with, until you wet them down. And you find, depending on the manufacturer of the paint that you've got, the half pans will soften at different rates when you add a little bit of water to them. But if you want to get technical, half pans are basically what they call a cake. There you go, this one obviously doesn't stick in there very well. And that's all it is. These are extruded bits of paint and then chopped, as you can see. And they just simply go within that little pot that you've got on your right. And that basically is your half pan. And you can see where they've been cut on the side as well, can't you? Now if you enjoyed this video, please click on that like and subscribe button down below. Every like and subscribe will go a long way for my YouTube channel, just as a way of saying thank you. Thank you. Well, first of all, you need to wet them. And to wet them, you need to use a spray bottle like this one here. Let me do this away from my watercolour paper first of all. Cover it up. Grab yourself a little spray bottle like that. Cheap and cheerful for about £1, 50 cents, whatever it might be. And then lightly mist it like that. And that's plenty. That's all I need to do. I also do the same within my mixing palette as well. Once you've wet them, don't use your decent brushes to mix them with, because you've got very nice points on those brushes that will ruin that point very quickly indeed. So all you need to do is grab an old brush like this old beastie here. So you need to wet your brush, and all I'm doing there, this is my double water pot. You can buy these fairly cheaply as well, or use 2 jam jars like that. There you go, anything like that will do. So you'll have one for dirty and one for clean. So the idea is once you've washed your brush out, you wash it in the dirty water first of all, dry it in some kitchen roll down below, and then wash it out again before you go to the paint in the clean water. Then you'll end up with a nice clean brush. So when you're working with your half pans, all you need to do, wet your brush, take a little bit of water off like that, and then grab some colour. When I spray my half pans, I very often let the spray settle into the paints for probably about 5 or 10 minutes, just to soften them that little bit before I start to work with them. And then pop in that paint in the palette. And they've got different consistencies as well. You've got watery, milky, creamy, and thick. So I'm going to wash that brush out in the dirty water first of all. Give it a tap, and then into the clean water. Then that's nice and clean again for the next colour. Let's go for ultramarine blue or French ultramarine. Depends on which one you've got. Make that into sort of a dark green. There you go, look. So that's more of a watery consistency, the amount of pigment I've got compared to the water within that mixing well. And that will give us something like this here. There you go, that sort of colour. So if I want to make it thicker and also a little bit more greenier, I'm going to wash that brush out in them 2 separate pots again and go to my yellow, my lemon yellow, add that in. Look at that for lovely green look. But to make it slightly thicker, you'll need more pigment. And put even more yellow in, but take most of that water off the brush now. So I want it more to milky consistency now. You can see there's not a great deal of water left in that half pan. So I'm going to really work it up. This is where the tube paints come in useful, but as I mentioned earlier on, I would only use tube paints for large washes. So if I wanted to completely cover this area here, sometimes I use a tube paint for doing that, just to save having to keep remixing and working up those colours in those half pans. Now that's a little bit thicker and brighter, as you can see. It's like a lime green now, isn't it? Wash the brush out again in the dirty, then in the clean. Take most of that water off. Then a bit of French ultramarine. We'll pop that in. Just bring it more of a green colour. That's more of a milky consistency because when I run it down the side of the mixing well, you can see it goes down a little bit slower than just watered down paint. And the colour now is something like that. Look at that for variety of colour. If that was watery, wash that brush out again, Paul. You find it could be something like that there. That's watery, that's milky. But if I want to get even thicker than that, be ready for this. I'm going to take most of that water off that brush again. Give it a good old mix. Oh, this is really thick. It's not as easy to get thicker paint with half pans than it is with tube paints. So worth bearing that in mind. It's all down to how much water that you use. But we've got to be careful of when you wash that brush out, which I'm just doing again, look at the state of my water there. The dirty water, as you can see, and also the clean water on the right hand side. Then back in the clean, give it a good old wash out. And you know when it's clean because when you tap it on your kitchen roll, which is all I've got here, lot, it comes off nice and clean like that. And then we'll go into the ultramarine, or the French ultramarine, there you go, a little bit of that in there, and thicken it even more. And that's getting even thicker now, even thicker than before. Look at that. Look at that colour compared to this one here. That's definitely thicker, isn't it? And the more pigment you add and the less water you add, the thicker that colour will get. So I'll give you the lowdown on half pans and how they tend to work really. You know, and how thick you need that paint to be. And the different consistencies of that paint. From watery to creamy to thick. As you can see, this alizarin crimson straight from the half pan. Isn't too bad. It's actually fairly thick on there, as you can see. But if I watered that down, what's my overbrush a minute, put a little bit of water away from that area, and then pop it into it, that weakens that colour down, and you get a nice weak sort of pinky wash like that. Or do like that. One more thing I need to tell you about before I go, and that is, when you wash your brush out, is that when you take most of that water off, you find that there's still water within that metal ferrule. And that will run down your bristles and then wet the paint even further. So you've got to make sure that all of that water is out of there, and all you need to do with that, just keep tapping it, because you know that water's going to run downhill. And then you'll have a brush which is nearly dry, not quite, but nearly dry. And a slightly damp brush is ideal for different things, it really is. If that's slightly damp, we'll end up getting there is something which is, well, fairly dry paint in a way. You find it could break up on the paper, as you can see here. If I take all that paint off like that, look at the way that sort of breaks up on the paper. And again, that's really good for textured effects as well. Because if you're using cold pressed paper like I'm using here, this one is made by St Cuthbert's Mill, it's their Bockingford brand, you can get some nice cool effects by creating texture on the paper, just by using a nearly dry brush. Now I've got plenty of tips and technique videos for you to watch. Have a look at the video to the top right hand corner of the screen. I'll see you there.